There's a specific kind of silence that blankets the world after 2 in the morning. It's not just the absence of noise. It's heavier than that. It's a presence, a waiting. It's in that particular silence that you can feel the true age of the universe. I used to find comfort in it. I used to take a telescope out into my backyard, into that profound stillness, and feel a sense of connection to the cosmos. A feeling of being infinitesimally small, yes, but part of something immeasurably vast and beautiful. That comfort is gone now. The silence feels different. It's not waiting anymore. It's watching. My name is Arthur Wells, or at least it was. Now, I feel more like a fading recording of that man, a playback of memories and personality traits that no longer feel like my own. I am recording this testimony because I can no longer trust my own senses, especially my sight, and even my own hand. When I try to write, the lines on the page seem to bend and warp when I'm not paying direct attention. The letters themselves appear to shift and rearrange into cryptic symbols that I feel I almost recognize, like a language I've long forgotten for a very important reason. I have to speak this account aloud, to ground it in the physical reality of sound, hoping that the waves of my voice cannot be corrupted in the same way my vision has been. At least not yet. There is a unique kind of silence that settles over the world after 2 in the morning. It's more than just an absence of noise. It's a heavy, palpable presence, a feeling of waiting. In that profound stillness, one can sense the immense age of the universe. I used to find solace in it. I would take my telescope into the backyard, immerse myself in that deep quiet, and feel a profound connection to the cosmos. It was a feeling of being infinitesimally small, yet part of something immeasurably vast and magnificent. That comfort is now gone. The silence feels different. It is no longer waiting. It is watching. It all started on an unremarkable Tuesday in late October. The air was crisp, holding the first real promise of the coming winter. The sky was perfectly clear, a deep, flawless indigo canvas that is only possible in a rural area, far from the light pollution of the nearest city. I was an amateur astronomer, a hobbyist who knew the constellations as well as the back of my hand: Orion the Hunter, Cassiopeia the Queen, and the familiar anchoring light of Polaris, the North Star. They were my celestial neighborhood. That particular night, I was calibrating a new, powerful lens for my 12-inch Dobsonian telescope. It was a magnificent piece of equipment, my personal gateway to the heavens. I had spent hours meticulously aligning it, my fingers numb from the cold, my breath forming clouds in the red beam of my headlamp. My goal was to get a clear view of the Andromeda Galaxy, an entire island of stars located 2.5 million light-years away. To see it, even as a faint, fuzzy patch of light, is to look back in time, to witness light that began its journey when our earliest ancestors were first taking their steps on Earth. This was what I loved about astronomy. The sheer scale, the history, the elegant and predictable physics of it all. It was celestial clockwork. After completing the calibration, I decided to simply observe the sky with my naked eye before focusing on Andromeda. I leaned back in my dew-soaked lawn chair, switched off my headlamp, and allowed my eyes to adjust to the complete darkness. The Milky Way was a brilliant, shimmering ribbon splashed across the dome of the night. It was a perfect, peaceful moment. And then I saw it. It was located in the patch of sky between the constellations Lyra and Cygnus, an area that should have been relatively empty, marked only by a scattering of faint, distant stars. But there was a new star, or rather, it was not a star. That was the first, instinctive thought that entered my mind with absolute clarity. That's not a star. Stars twinkle, a beautiful effect caused by their light being distorted by the Earth's atmosphere. Planets, being closer, shine with a steady, unwavering light from a disk rather than a point. Satellites move, gliding across the sky in smooth, predictable arcs. Meteors are fleeting, brilliant streaks that burn up in the atmosphere. This object did none of those things. It didn't twinkle. It didn't shine. It didn't move. It was simply there. It was a point of light, no bigger than Jupiter appears on a clear night, but it wasn't bright. In fact, it was the opposite of bright. It seemed to absorb the light around it. Imagine the purest, darkest black you can conceive, a perfect void. Now imagine a pinprick in the center of that void. But this pinprick wasn't letting light through. It was as if the pinprick itself was the source of the darkness. It was a hole, a puncture in the very fabric of the night sky. I stared at it, my mind racing through every possible logical explanation. A new type of satellite in a geostationary orbit that I wasn't aware of? No, it would still reflect sunlight. A strange atmospheric phenomenon? No, the air was perfectly still and clear. Was it a dead pixel in my own vision? I looked away, blinking, focusing on the brilliant star Vega nearby. My vision was perfectly fine. I looked back. It was still there. This tiny, defiant point of absolute nothingness. My scientific curiosity soon overshadowed my growing unease. I swung the heavy telescope towards it, my hands fumbling with the alignment knobs. After a few minutes, I centered the finder scope on that patch of sky, then leaned in, placing my eye to the new lens. The first sensation was a wave of intense vertigo. Through the telescope, the object was no longer a point. It was a shape, but it was a shape my brain could not process. It was a geometric impossibility, like trying to perceive a three-dimensional object that was somehow occupying only 2 dimensions, while simultaneously displaying properties of a fourth. It was a knot of angles that were all fundamentally wrong. It had sharp corners that were also curves, and surfaces that appeared to recede and advance at the same time. And it wasn't truly black. It was a color I had never seen before, a shade for which my mind had no name. It was the color of absence itself, the color of a concept that should not exist. A strange pressure began to build behind my eyes, a dull throb that synchronized with my heartbeat. I kept looking, mesmerized and horrified, as my mind struggled to force this impossible image into a familiar category. It tried to dismiss it as an optical illusion, a lens flare, or a distortion from the new equipment. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my bone, that it wasn't. I was looking at something real, something that broke the fundamental rules of physics, geometry, and perception itself. I don't know how long I looked. Time seemed to stretch and thin like molasses. The pressure in my head intensified into a sharp, piercing headache. I finally pulled away from the eyepiece, gasping for air, my eye watering. My vision swam. Stumbling back from the telescope, my heart hammered against my ribs. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the afterimage was burned onto the inside of my eyelids, that impossible, sickening shape. When I opened my eyes again and the headache began to subside, I looked up at the sky. It was gone. The space between Lyra and Cygnus was empty again, holding only the faint, familiar stars I knew so well. Frantically, I looked back through the telescope, scanning the area. There was nothing. It had simply vanished. A wave of relief so powerful it made me dizzy washed over me. It must have been an illusion, a trick of the eye, a strange reflection in the new lens, amplified by the late hour and the cold. A self-induced hallucination. That had to be the explanation. The alternative was simply not possible. I packed up my equipment with shaking hands. The profound silence of the night no longer felt comforting. It felt predatory. The familiar constellations no longer seemed like friendly guides. They looked like the bars of a vast cage. I retreated into the warm, artificial light of my house, locking the door behind me, consumed by a deep and irrational fear. I didn't sleep that night, sitting in my armchair and trying to rationalize what I had seen. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. The hole, the knot, the shape that should not be. I told myself it would all fade in the morning, but I was wrong. The sun rose, and the world returned to its mundane state. But something inside me had been fundamentally altered. The very lens of my own eye, the mechanism by which I perceived reality, had been permanently recalibrated. My vision has been wrong ever since. The first day was insidious because the changes were so subtle, a collection of tiny, almost unnoticeable inconsistencies. While making coffee, I noticed the white of my favorite ceramic mug seemed duller, as if a gray film had been laid over it. At work, as an architect, I rely on precise, straight lines. But as I looked at the blueprints on my screen, the vertical lines seemed to possess a slight, almost imperceptible curve, as if bowing under an immense, unseen weight. I checked them with a level. The tool said they were straight, the computer said they were straight, but my eyes insisted on a subtle, nauseating curvature. This quiet panic persisted throughout the day. Every straight line, the edge of my desk, the door frame, the tile grout seemed suspect. Colors were muted. The vibrant red of a stop sign was closer to maroon. The blue of the sky a washed-out cyan. I was living in a poorly color-corrected photograph of the world I once knew. That evening, I went to an optometrist complaining of blurry vision and headaches. She put me through a battery of tests. The letters on the chart were the worst part. The clean edges of an E or a T seemed to shimmer. The circle of an O felt unstable. In the end, after examining my retinas, she declared my vision to be a perfect 20/20. She found no signs of any physical problems and attributed my symptoms to stress. Her reassurance was terrifying. If the problem wasn't in my eyes, where was it? The days that followed were a quiet, escalating nightmare. The world kept presenting me with these small, undeniable heresies of perception. The road ahead would seem to dip and swerve impossibly. A rectangular table would momentarily appear as a trapezoid. Most disturbingly, I began to see fleeting asymmetries in people's faces, an eye slightly larger than the other, a smile not quite matching on both sides. It was like talking to reflections in a funhouse mirror, making it difficult to connect with anyone. I never looked at the night sky again. My telescope gathered dust, a sarcophagus for a cursed memory. The world was slowly, inexorably, coming undone. Or perhaps, my ability to perceive the comforting lie of its structure was failing, which I suspected was much, much worse. The subtle shifts were merely a prelude. What came next was not a distortion of reality, but a revelation of it. It began with shadows. Shadows are supposed to be simple, predictable two-dimensional projections. But my shadows were alive. I first noticed it when the shadow of my lamp twitched, a quick serpentine flex when I wasn't looking directly at it. When I snapped my head to look, it was perfectly still. This phenomenon became constant, but only in my peripheral vision. The shadow under my couch would seethe like black water. The shadow of a bird would seem to writhe on the floor for a second before vanishing. The world, seen from the corner of my eye, was a place of writhing, living darkness. Trying to catch it in the act was impossible. The moment I shifted my attention, the shadow would become inert and normal. The horror was always, and only, on the edge of sight. Then, the geometry of the world began to break down completely. As an architect, my world is grounded in Euclidean geometry, the reliable math of points, lines, and planes. One morning, I was holding a small, wooden cube. For a fraction of a second, I saw it not as a cube but as a shape with 7 faces, an edge that connected to 3 different planes simultaneously, and a vertex that was both concave and convex. It was a cascade of impossible angles, a structure of pure paradox. I dropped it in shock, and when I looked down, it was just a normal cube again. But I had seen it. The wrongness from that point in the sky was a different set of physical rules, and looking at it had installed a new, faulty operating system in my brain. This began to happen more frequently. Bookshelves would momentarily intersect with themselves. The staircase in my home would appear to ascend and descend at the same time in an Escher-like nightmare. As always, the worst were faces. In a supermarket line, a woman smiled at her child, and for an instant, I saw her face through the filter of this new geometry. Her features rearranged themselves into an architecture of horror. Her eyes were connected by a plane passing through her nose, and her smile was an opening that folded back into her face at an impossible angle. It was a mockery of a human face, a three-dimensional illusion attempting to represent something that required more dimensions to exist truthfully. I fled the store in terror. I was no longer just seeing things incorrectly. I was seeing a layer beneath the surface, an alien framework that governed reality. The world I knew was a facade, a simple shape drawn over a set of blueprints that would drive a man mad. And the thing in the sky had given me the ability to read those blueprints. I became terrified of my own reflection, avoiding mirrors for weeks. The fear of confirming my own monstrous transformation was more than I could bear. My rational mind, however, demanded answers. I saw a neurologist, carefully describing my symptoms as geometric hallucinations. I prayed for a tumor, a physical, explainable cause. But after an MRI, the verdict was the same as the optometrist's. My brain was textbook normal. He suggested it was a rare form of migraine or something psychosomatic, and prescribed anti-anxiety medication. I knew then that the problem wasn't a broken machine, but the terrifying signal it was now forced to receive. My next step was to find proof. I spent my nights scouring astronomy forums and databases for any record of the anomaly I had seen. I found countless UFO sightings, but none matched my experience. They spoke of bright lights and moving craft. I had seen a stationary, light-devouring hole. The lack of any corroboration, any other witness, was a new kind of terror. It fed the doubt that I was simply losing my mind. But then I would see a crack in the pavement branch out into non-existent dimensions, and I knew it was real. My world had become a private hell. In a fit of desperation, I took out my telescope again. I didn't point it at the sky. I pointed it at my neighbor's house, a symbol of suburban normalcy. Looking through the powerful lens, the effect was amplified 100-fold. The brickwork was not a flat surface but a pulsating, shifting mosaic of tiny, complex polyhedrons. The window glass was a slowly swirling vortex of light. The straight line of the roof gutter was a vibrant, shimmering waveform. The telescope was magnifying the wrongness, showing me the world as the thing in the sky saw it. Not as stable matter, but as seething, chaotic, geometric energy, barely contained by a fragile illusion of form. I finally understood. My vision wasn't broken. It had been upgraded, corrected. I was no longer seeing the comfortable lie. I was seeing the terrifying truth. The thing in the sky hadn't damaged my eyes. It had opened them. I now live permanently in the uncanny valley. The landscape of my entire world is a place that is almost, but not quite, right. The intermittent flashes of geometric horror have stabilized into my baseline reality. The comforting illusion of normalcy is gone forever. I now see the world as a constant, shimmering, architectural cascade. A tree is a slow, violent explosion of fractal mathematics. A glass of water is a contained tempest of impossible physics. It is exhausting to live in a world of such raw, unfiltered complexity, but the sheer alien nature of inanimate objects has become a new, terrifying kind of normal. But I will never get used to faces. In a moment of foolish hope, I took the towel off my bathroom mirror, thinking I might be immune to my own reflection. I was wrong. The thing I saw was wearing my skin. The basic shape was mine, but the substance was all wrong. My eyes were dark, swirling vortices, pulling light into them. My skin was a translucent layer over a complex, shifting lattice of light and shadow. The geometry of my face was the geometry from the sky, not of impossible angles, a sculpture of living paradox. I saw that my human face was a thin, barely convincing mask, and underneath it, I saw what I truly was, a being of angles and light whose true form was not meant for this dimension. The final, soul-crushing revelation came when I had to leave my house. I put on sunglasses and a hat, but it was useless. I saw people on the street, families, children laughing, and I saw them for what they truly were. They were all like me. Underneath the thin veneer of their humanity, their smiles and frowns, was the same alien architecture, the same impossible geometry. I saw a young couple holding hands not as people, but as two intricate, interlocking systems of light and angles projecting an illusion. They were all walking around, living their lives, completely unaware of their own true nature, believing the mask was their face. The thing in the sky didn't curse me, cured me. It gave me true sight. And the truth is this: we are not what we think we are. Humanity is a disguise for something older, stranger, and more complex. Our true forms would shatter the minds of those who saw them. We have been blessed with an ignorance of our own nature, given simple Euclidean minds to perceive a simple Euclidean world so that we may live our lives without going mad. I am now a member of a species who has accidentally woken up from a shared dream, alone in my wakefulness, surrounded by billions of sleepers. This is the deepest isolation of all, to know that the consciousness of someone you love is real, but it is housed in a form that is fundamentally, terrifyingly alien. My vision isn't wrong. It's tuned to a frequency no human was ever meant to perceive. The horror is that at our very core, we are all the thing that wasn't a star. I am recording this as a warning. Someday you may find yourself under a dark sky and see something that doesn't feed a darkness too perfect, a light that doesn't twinkle. Your mind will try to explain it away. My advice is to let it. Believe the comforting lie. Do not fetch your telescope. Do not stare. Turn away, go back inside, and be grateful for your simple, flawed, beautifully ignorant human eyes. Be grateful for the mask, because there are truths in the universe our minds are not built to contain. Once you have truly seen them, you can never go back. You will be awake, forever, in the beautiful, silent, screaming reality of it all. Be careful what you look for in the dark, because you might just find it. Thank you for listening to this entry of the Wilderness Protocol. We hope you found this account illuminating. If these stories resonate with you, if you feel a connection to the quiet places and the dark corners of the world, consider subscribing to the channel and enabling notifications. It helps us to continue broadcasting these testimonies from the fringe. Until next time, be safe and watch the skies.